coming to you pre-recorded from here, not in Katowice, but rather one town over, because we needed a hospital. We are here today with a very special correspondence podcast. Very exciting development has happened recently. We are going to be going over the patch notes that we didn't think we'd be getting this soon. And by we, I do in fact mean me, Yaku of Nizaku, alongside El Jarvis Humano que tiene Yaris Toyota. And we are going to be doing that, ably produced by Photograph Buikawish Kitorej Robil Wile Futter Kuro of the Kuros.
What the hell did you just say, Yaku? It's great to be back. It's great to be back, Yaku. I was just quickly looking this up. Apparently, this is PondCast episode 12, and the last PondCast was February 26th, 2023, over a year ago. But we're back just over a year later.
Yes, right on schedule.
Right on. I think last time we were like, no, yeah, we'll try and do this more regularly. That didn't happen.
Didn't happen. We were like, yeah, we're gonna do this more regularly before we looked at the schedules of like KSL and like Kung Fu Cup and WTL and everything else. Not that we're complaining, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
We love that. We love the fact that we do have a lot of stuff for our players to be playing in. They do have ways to support themselves and to practice as well. And it's something too that we as viewers can also cast and enjoy. But that is kind of the thing that happened that interfered a little bit with PondCast.
Yeah, we had a really busy 2023, and I'm sure we're going to have an even busier 2024 because we're going to try and squeeze in a couple of podcasts. And a big reason as to why we can do this right now is because we're going to have a bit of a shorter episode. Like, I was just checking, and usually we're like 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. Our last podcast was 4 hours long, and this should be far shorter than that because we only have one topic, the patch notes.
Indeed. We're going to be giving out quick little bits right at you.
Yeah. We're just going to quickly go over the patch notes, give our thoughts, give our opinions, give our insight, considering that we've been casting quite a lot of StarCraft as of late. So we wanted to quickly go over what is going to be coming up next. We should also preface all of this with the fact that these patch notes are not final, right? It's like they are susceptible to changes. They could be adjusted. Currently, it is live on the PTR, but because it's a PTR, changes can happen.
Indeed. This is kind of the reason why they release it so early. It's so people can jump in, test it out, report any bugs, but more importantly, also give their thoughts and say, hey, this is a nerf that was supposed to do this, but it's not doing that. And instead, it's messing everything else up. So maybe don't go live with that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, feedback is always welcome, and changes can be made.
That's the word I was thinking of.
Yeah, exactly. Not EMP.
Yes.
So we're going to be getting into that. And first things first, when it comes to the overall patch, before we dive into their goal with the patch, I wanted to quickly go over the maps because the biggest thing is that we finally get a new map pool. It has been adjusted. I mean, we had a pretty recent map pool change, right? I think it was October of last year, relatively recently, end of October, where we got 9 new maps, like a fresh set of new maps right off the back in October, which was insane at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It was insane because of the sheer quantity. It was insane because they just wiped the board clean. They just wiped the pool clean. They drained it, and then they filled it out with a new pool of maps. This time, though, and I'm liking, we're still going to be having 9 maps in the map pool, and I'm liking this quite a bit. However, 4 of them, I believe, are going to be carried over from the current map pool, and 5 of them are going to be new maps.
Yeah, and I think this was a big question in the back of everyone's mind, was whether or not the swiping the slate clean was going to be the new norm, right? Is like, are we just going to get like 9 fresh new maps every single time now, or are we going to revert back to normal? Are we going to go back to 7 maps instead of 9? So now we have some answers to those questions, and as you mentioned, it is going to still stay as 9 maps, but we're not getting a full fresh set of maps. We will still hold on to at least a couple of them.
Yeah, specifically Golden Aura, Sight Delta, Oceanborn, and Alcyone. A Cyclone. Alcyone? I'm glad that that's still going to be here to trip people up.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, we're going to be saying goodbye to Hecate, Equilibrium, Rat House, my beloved Raduzet
Mm,
Station. I call it Rat House.
uh-huh.
And two others that I probably vetoed.
Yeah, they are gonna be vetoed. They are, or they're gonna be gone forever now. They're
Mhm.
they're gonna be lost to the annals of time. Which, yeah, I mean, definitely exciting to that we're gonna get some new maps. We haven't actually gone over them yet. We haven't gone over post.
Mhm.
It's gonna be post youth, Amphion, Crimson
I
Court, Dynasty, and Ghost River. Uh,
I too read it as amphibian.
yeah.
Yeah,
I just want another underwater map.
yeah.
What can I say? What can I
Yeah,
say?
I'm glad we're continuing the tradition of having at least one map that will trip
Mhm,
people up when it comes to the pronunciation. But more
mhm.
importantly, though, I'm kind of if we were to look at the uh, PTR or the official post by Blizzard here, talking about the PTR patch, we scroll down a little bit before that when it goes to the general notes. There's actually some talks about map features that I believe will be in the some of the new maps.
I'm uncertain of that. I think these maps were made ahead of time before these features are being implemented. But I think it's really exciting because this is all just like it can all lead to like more variety when it comes to new maps, right? Like I don't think this is really too controversial. I think everyone's like, oh yeah, look, this is nice.
Yeah,
Just have more variety here. Quickly
yeah.
going over them. Mineral fields can now be destroyed by destructible terrain in a multitude of different ways. We have we have rocks that can bleed out over time with like creep rocks or like Zerg, quote unquote Zerg rocks. And
Hmm.
we also have like some more cleaner unit collision as they mineral walk through minerals as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a nice little quality of life change with the workers. But what I'm really curious about is the whole Zerg rocks idea.
Mhm,
I feel like that can open up a whole lot of different avenues here for map makers. I'm not entirely sure how it works. Is it the case of, you have them on the map by default, and then maybe there's
mhm.
one neutral creep tumor next to it to keep it alive, or it's there on the map, but there's no creep at all. So if you're in a matchup without any Zerg, it's basically just going to be ticking down, and as time goes on, there's going to be another attack path opening up, or if it is a matchup with a Zerg player in there, maybe they could try to keep it alive. I don't know. It's a lot of there's a lot of options here for map
Yeah,
makers.
and I think what's interesting about this is that this is not something that this is something new to StarCraft 2, but this is something that we saw in Brood War actually. Brood
Hmm.
War had a lot of creativity when it came to how they constructed their maps, and they also had similar things. They had like they had like neutral Evo chambers that would like bleed out over time on the map. They would have like the eggs that have the speed zones, slow zones, areas that will deal damage, like they had a lot of creativity and a lot of like variety when it came to features on their custom maps, and it's kind of weird that we're just now getting it, but it's one of those things where it's like, no, yeah, that's cool, like, yeah,
Yeah,
why didn't we have that before? But but like nice
I
nonetheless that we do have this available.
absolutely. I for one cannot wait to see negative zeros. What negative zeros chaotic brain can create with these features.
Hmm. For sure, for sure. Like I'd love to know as well. I imagine like they can still obviously be destroyed as well. So like rocks like this, like, they're gonna die over time, but you could also like I imagine speed up the process by also attacking it as well. And as you mentioned, you can use this to like seal off gold bases or to open up attack paths, or you can get creative with it. And that's what I love most is that it just gives map makers a little bit more freedom when it comes to how creative they want to be.
Absolutely. So as they don't get too creative.
I mean, I thought you liked Madison Station.
I do, I do, I do. It's
You're an
ironically my
animal.
highest map, my highest win rate map right now.
You're an animal, Pappy. You're an animal. Quickly going over something that we glossed over there, outside of the new features that are going to be available in these maps, is that for the first time in over a year, it's been a long time since the team ladder map pool was updated, and it's finally getting updated.
Yeah, I kind of glossed over that a little bit because I just kind of assumed it was,
Mhm.
going to be just a formality. It's just going to be like, ah, yes, we're going to be having the same maps, but no, these are some different names that I'm seeing, especially on 3v3 and 4v4.
100%. It's great to see that team games are getting a little bit of love. Obviously, they're not as it's the team games aren't really as popular as 1v1. But it's great that we have that, and I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be a little bit tempting for like people, for myself included, to actually play team games again. It's like, oh, there's new maps. Let's have some fun. Like, let's just ape
Yeah.
it up and bring the ducklings together again. You
Oh, that can only end well.
know. Oh no,
Gonna
it's
wake
not good.
Milk back from retirement and
Yeah.
to suffer through us again.
It's gonna be beautiful. So yeah, again, we haven't quite gone through the maps ourselves, but there's a lot of new maps for the team games. Do recommend checking it out. And again,
Yeah.
I think what's great about team game maps is that they don't have to be balanced. Like usually they're really
Hmm.
chaotic, they're really big, they're really small, and they don't have to adhere to like the quality or like the rules that 1v1 has. So like yeah, they can be a lot more fun.
Yeah. They don't have to be balanced. I like the way you I like the way you
Yeah.
put
Yeah.
it there.
They're mate. They're imba, papi. They're imba. It's awful. I hate them. But it's gonna be a lot of fun. With that though, we can sink our teeth into the overall patch notes. Quickly before we do, I thought it would be interesting to go over their goals because if we have a look at some of the comments by the Balance Council, dubbed Balance Council, they actually have a couple of like goals that they stated that they want out of this patch.
Indeed they do. It won't quite be found on the official post that was made on blizzard.com or Blizzard forums, but you can find them over at well, I'm not going to say it all out. There's a pinned post somewhere on Reddit that
Yeah.
actually has the link to go
Mhm.
through it. And we'll probably put it in the description as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. We'll have all the links in the description of the video, so it's all going to be there, so you can have a look alongside us, or you can just look on your screen as we are going over them now. We can quickly go over the previous.
Technology.
We can quickly go over the previous patch comments. Quickly going over it. Patch 5.0.12 was a big effort from the Community Balance Council working on it, so we'd like to thank everyone. Oh, they appreciate. They're
You're
just appreciating
welcome.
everyone. Yeah, you. You're welcome. We did a lot of work there. Yeah, yeah. The community. Let's go. While I believe that some of the previous patch goals were successfully achieved, other goals, for example, related to Protoss versus Terran matchup, are yet to be accomplished. Certain changes originally received mixed feedback from the community and also led to unintentional consequences, particularly in the case of cyclones in Terran versus Terran, so we might need to revisit those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a little bit. With the upcoming patch, we would like to take a more careful approach and focus on a fewer goals to improve the current state of the game. The pro gamers involved in the Balance Council feel that the state of Terran versus Zerg and Protoss versus Zerg doesn't require any major balance changes.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
That pretty much tracks, I would say.
Yeah, I
Like
do
there are
think that. Go on.
yeah, I was gonna say there's a few annoying things in TVZ. I mean, just coming from the Terran perspective, things like say borrowed infestors and whatnot. That again, they're annoying, but they're not completely broken. They're not unbalanced. It's just something that can and probably should be utilized by Zerg players, and it's not impossible for Terran players to overcome them.
Yeah, I think for the most part I agree with that statement. I think the consensus is that like PVZ and Zerg versus Terran and Zerg versus Protoss are in pretty good places right now. Not perfect, and as they
Hmm.
said, like it's
They,
not like they're not going to touch them. Just nothing major is going to be
yeah.
changed about them. At least ideally, apparently,
Hmm.
with these patches.
Yeah.
So we could see some tweaks here and there. But for the most part, like people enjoy where it is, or at
Mm.
least it's perceived to be that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I can't really speak that much for PvZ or for Protoss versus Zerg, as I don't really play Protoss or Zerg. But I can say as a viewer, I've been liking some of the things I've been seeing from. I've been liking some of the PvZs we've been witnessing most recently.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely been a lot of good fun. There are things to be addressed. I think the most obvious one, which is what this patch is going to be focusing on, I think there has been a clear community consensus that TVP needs help and that Protoss specifically needs help in the PvT matchup. I think that's something that
Mhm.
most people can agree on. I remember talking to Asher even like a year ago about it, and he was like, "No, yeah, like it's looking pretty good in certain aspects where like even mind drops, for example, don't even need to do a lot of damage, and if they do, it's like a bonus, and like you get so much of that going on, and it's so difficult to defend against that, and that's going to be like one of the big things addressed as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's I think probably been the common consensus for the past 2 or maybe 3 years at this point,
Yeah,
depending
yeah.
on how
Uh,
long you've been, keeping up with forums and TL
uh-huh.
and Reddit and whatnot. But
Really, it's like
yeah,
5 years ago, and Stardock is like, finally, people are listening to me. You know, PVT has been unwinnable. It's
it's like
so
finally that one hero in Kerrigan survival's getting nerfed.
Starduck vindicated after years of saying PvT was unwinnable. But yeah, I do think that it's nice to have like a smaller goal overall for the patch. You know, we're not focusing on too much too quickly. So that's definitely a good thing. And apparently, when it comes to their patch goal, specifically, they're going to be looking to improve the state of Protoss versus Terran matchup at the professional
Hmm.
level, specifically. Um, Followed by address the community concerns about the most oppressive openings like Cyclone All-Ins and Widowmine drops,
Hmm.
and implement quality of life improvements and small changes proposed by map making community to give more freedom in the competitive map design.
Definitely. Now, that second point, when they put it there, address the community concerns about the most oppressive openings like Cyclone All-Ins and Widowmine drops. That is specifically for TVP, but I'm not gonna lie. I think that's gonna be Cyclone All-In specifically. That's gonna be a huge improvement for TVT as well.
Yeah. TBT has been a very interesting one to follow. We can get into it soon. What I will say is that Cyclone All-Ins, like Widowmine drops, of course, have been around for a very long time, and people have been talking about them. If you remember, even in the last patch, that was the patch that specifically made it so that the Widowmine the targeting of the mine became more noticeable. They're making it
Hmm.
even more noticeable now, but they started that last patch also addressing Widowmine drops. Clearly, it wasn't enough, and they're readdressing it. But it just goes to show that this has
Yeah,
been perceived to be a bit of an issue for quite some time.
yeah. And I think I do agree with the way that they will be trying to address the Widowmines. We'll get into that a little bit later.
Mhm.
But yeah, I like that they're not completely nerfing it. There are a
Yeah,
few nerfs, but it's not going to be nerfs that make it completely unviable.
for sure. Get into the first one, Bobby. Get into the first one.
All right, we're getting in here. We are looking at the Terran changes. First off, before the Widowmine, a very short little change with the Liberator here. Advanced Ballistics, the upgrade that increases lib range, will be reducing the overall total range of the Liberator from 3 to 2. Or wait, no, from 4 to 3. Wait, no, math. Basically range libs are going to be one thing shorter now.
They are going to be one range shorter, and I do like this. When it comes, okay, so when it comes to
Yeah.
TVP and when it comes to army compositions and how they kind of ebb and flow, there is a very big power spike for Terran, which is Ghost Lib, right? When they
Hmm.
get into Ghost Lib, that usually has to force out Skytoss out of Protoss, and even then, it's just it can be an awkward transition, especially if you don't have a good economy. If you aren't already working towards it, it's a very difficult thing for Protoss players to get away with. Specifically referring to the highest level, of course, the highest level of
Yeah.
play, and Ghost Lib can be quite oppressive in the mid game and in the mid to late game.
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. So this will be a change that will definitely be helping TVP a lot. But apart from that, I think another little bonus thing that we might be getting, depending on how it's utilized here, a nice little side effect is that we might be seeing some map changes. Or rather, we might be seeing some changes as to how map makers approach things like dead air and whatnot, because that was
Mhm.
really something that map makers had to really, really keep in mind previously. Was how do we try to balance this with liberators if we get into the late game.
Yeah, and that's a big kind of side effect from this, as you're mentioning, and they even refer to it as well when it comes to like the balance council notes.
Mhm.
But with one reduced range, it does mean that Liberator harass in the late game of even TVZ and TVP as well is less oppressive because we've all seen moments when like you get like two Liberators rocking up and they just deny mining from the base. And if you don't
Oh
have like
yeah,
if you don't have like air units, if you don't
yeah,
have like a Void Ray or a Phoenix or like a Corruptor or something, then you just can't do anything about it. Like Queens can't reach it, Hydras can't reach it, Stalkers can't reach it, and you just don't get any mining. And as good as that feels, as you're alluding to, right?
yeah,
Like it feels good as a Terran, but is it something that we want in the game though? I think getting rid of that or at least reducing how often that happens I don't think that's the worst thing. I think that's
yeah,
probably a good thing when it comes to the health of the game and kind of the state of play.
yeah. Definitely feels good when you're doing it, but yeah, I mean, even as a viewer, I can admit it's not a very exciting thing to watch in especially something like TVZ to just have two liberators denying mining from a Zerg base and the Zerg player just not being able to not having enough resources to build a late game army and then just kind of getting rolled over.
Yeah, I mean, talking about some specific games, like I remember specifically, especially on Side Delta and Alcione, basically these larger maps, these much larger maps where it takes a lot longer to go from edge to edge. If we're in the late game and if we're fighting on one side of the map, then Liberators rock up and they deny mining for one base and then they win. Like that can win you the game. Like denying a full base worth of mining in that game state can win you it. And we've seen that, with players like Solar or Dark or Rainer, like we've seen them be in that situation before, and it can be so difficult to deal with libs, especially if you're not working towards that kind of anti-air army composition. If you don't have those corruptors, just because that's not what you're working with, it can
Hmm.
be quite brutal. So, yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing to reduce that. Even though that is a side effect, I think that's something that they're taking into account and that is intentional.
Yeah, definitely. And
Um,
that concludes the Liberator change again. Just one little change here, but we've got a whole lot more, and we've got more for Terran here. The big one for TVP specifically, Widow Mines. And we are going to be addressing them first off. Invisibility while reloading now requires drilling claws instead of just an armory. So this was actually what it was like a long ass time ago, about 2021, 2020, something like that, before they made initially the change to require drilling claws for invisibility, and then afterwards they changed that to only the armory. So yeah, we're going back to that a little bit. Splash radius slightly reduced from 1.75 to 1.5, so that will pretty much allow, theoretically at least, that will pretty much allow Widowmine to still be very useful in fights, but they're not going to completely wipe out a mineral line if you just drop two or three of them into a base. The huge one, specifically for mine drops, now gives an alert when burrowing within range of
mm,
enemy units. So that was, yeah, probably the biggest one that really tripped a lot of people up, especially a lot of Protoss players. Is that, when you're focusing on your whatever it is that you're doing, you you might not necessarily be looking at the mini map for those few couple of seconds when a medevac flight boosts in and a Widowmine gets a little bit starts to get borrowed. So yeah, this will trigger and it will kind of alert, as it says, alert you to fix
mm.
that. And finally, visibility of the toggling line and targeted unit is massively improved, and that can be seen in the GIF that I'm sure we're showing right now.
Exactly. And just quickly touching on something about the Liberator, it also applies here, is that the change reducing the range also increases counterplay, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's what we all want in StarCraft. Like you want the ability to counteract your opponent. And having the Liberator range reduced a little bit does mean that because it's closer, then you have to avoid spores, you have to micro against queens, right? You have to avoid biles. And there's that kind of ebb and flow that I think everyone loves about StarCraft, right? Like the micro and counter micro. And that's what's important about the Widowmine is that because now it also alerts you when it burrows and
Yep.
likewise the line is also more visible, then you can counterplay, right? You can peel off units more easily, right, and avoid big mine shots. You can react in time and pull away from it and all that stuff. Like it's all just giving the Protoss player more opportunities to. It isn't like if a player, if they have slow reaction anyway, then they're still going to take a lot of damage. But
Yeah.
if they have
Exactly.
slightly faster reaction, then they can counterplay, right? And they can use their micro to avoid damage. And that, I think that's like the biggest thing that we want to push here, and everything, and something that's like a really good way to like quote unquote nerf something by
Yeah.
just giving
And
players the opportunity to micro.
exactly. I think it's one of the most it's like a small thing that they really implemented here that I think really makes the most difference. And like you said, because like you said, it's balanced in such a way that if a player is slow to react, if they aren't, if they don't have the tightest control, or if
Mhm.
they're not really able to peel away a unit fast enough, they're still going to take damage. But at the pro level, at the very top, it just gives them that extra like 1 second or even half a second to identify which unit they need to pull away, and then they can just pull it away.
Yeah, and I think what I love about that
They're
change
not.
as well is, go on.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say it's not like they're making the firing rate slower or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So if you're a faster player, then I mean you can
Hmm.
react faster and you can minimize losses, right? And there's a bit of a trickle down effect as well for all of this, where I know this is meant to target like pro play, but even masters, diamond, even platinum players, like they have more time to react, and if they happen to be fast players and really good when it comes to micro, they can flex that a little bit more and they can show off a little bit more, and that's always a good thing. And yeah, that's why personally I really like those kind of like changes that aren't the most obvious, right? You
Hmm.
aren't nerfing the Widowmine when in the
Yeah,
sense where it deals less damage, or as you mentioned, has a slower attack rate. No, no,
it,
no. You can just micro better against it.
yeah. It's not numbers based.
Mhm.
Is how I put it. You're not affecting the numbers. You're not making it more or less. You're just, like you said, giving giving more opportunities for counterplay.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I really like the approach of the Widowmine and how they're changing it in that sense. Now, when it comes to the numbers that
The
they are changing, because they are changing some numbers here, uh,
a little bit.
this, yeah, this is going to be interesting because
Yeah.
I was having a discussion yesterday, I think with Frost,
Hmm.
and we were talking about how the Widowmine, these changes may affect other things, and something that we should quickly mention, the change to drilling claws or the change to cloak, it does. I'm pretty sure it does completely remove that committed mine drop opener where you open up with the armory, right, and you rush into cloak widow mines. Like that should be
What
dead, which I don't think is
I
the go on.
I why does this sound like you're talking directly to me? Why are you what are you trying to tell me here? Like,
You can't do it anymore, Yaku. You can't do it. It's dead, Yaku. It's dead. It's Get over it.
yeah,
We'll get you some new widow mines. Don't worry, it's fine.
I'll
Uh,
have to find another way to instantly win.
well, that's the problem, right? Is that
Yeah,
I
that was winning.
don't.
Yes.
That's not what I
No,
was.
no, 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 no. I get what
We-
you're saying. That
Mhm.
and that was very much a problem. I get what you're saying. It is something that's on paper. It sounded like it is a big commitment, right? You have to spend gas. You have to spend minerals to get this armory that isn't going to be useful outside of cloak until much much later in the game for the Terran side. But in reality, it's way less of a commitment for the Terran player than it is for the Zerg player to get a robo and get observers out, or to get a Stargate and to have oracles out and to make sure that oracles are here to actually, at the right position to actually throw down the reveal. So yeah, I get what you're saying, and it is definitely a change that's going to be much much better for the health of the game. Going to be worse for me specifically though, and I can have that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the health of the game, I think something that can hurt it, and that was the worst thing about the armory opener and the drilling claw commitment, or not drilling claw, but the Widowmine commitment, is that it did just end the game, right? Like
Yep.
if you got in and if there was no detection, you just win, and
Hmm.
that did happen from time to time at pro play. So getting rid of that, I think, is a good thing. What I will say is that
Definitely.
we do see that in other instances, and I'm curious if anything will ever be done about it. Something that has also been happening recently in PvP, and I'm pretty sure you've casted this even years ago as well. You would know that every now and then you can have like a Twilight Council DT opener,
Yep.
and then in PvP a DT walks across the map. There's no Robo, there's no Stargate. GG.
Yep.
The game just ends.
Or does it?
Uh,
Yeah. Or does a
and it's
Stargate and but you were opening Phoenixes, so now you don't have
mhm,
any resources for an Oracle,
mhm.
etc. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is also a thing that's in the game, and that has actually been happening more frequently. I say more frequently. I've casted it like maybe once every 2 weeks as of late, which is
That's
more prevalent
still
than
way too
before.
much. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's still too many times.
To have DTs just walk in and end the game is brutal, and it's a very similar kind of thought process or a very similar scenario to this, where like Widow Angel comes in, it can just end the game, and I don't think it's the best for the game. Um, which is why I'm hoping that maybe something can be done about that as well, and they are touching on it in an interesting way. So we'll get there. We'll get there eventually, but keep that in the back of your mind because in my brain, at
Yes.
least, getting rid of the armory opener is similar to the sense that like DT openers as well can end the game, and they
Yes.
aren't good for the game.
Yeah, I agree. But,
Mhm.
speaking about the armory,
Oh,
there's a change that personally am I personally welcome very, very much, but I'll have to see what you think about it, Light, and I'll have to see how it actually, affects pro play. The cost of the armory, specifically the gas cost, is going down, and oh boy, I'm here for it. I cannot tell you how many times I mistimed an attack because I uh, absent-mindedly wasn't getting gas, and my 1-1 was about to finish up, but I didn't have enough gas to throw down an armory because I was getting all my other upgrades or something.
I feel like the armory and I'm going to lump them up. The armory and the NG Bay changes, where the armory is
Hmm.
cheaper and infantry upgrades are reduced
Yeah.
as well.
Well,
This is going to make, I
yeah,
feel like, TVZ or just Terran play in general so much smoother. It's just going to be
absolutely.
like a blanket like quality of life like buff here for Terran players all around.
Absolutely. Like obviously it is just a flat out buff and it is just a flat out buff, but I think that it is, as you said, a buff that's meant to smoothen out the game or smoothen out play from Terran instead of actually, instead of specifically trying to get them to attack earlier or stuff like that. Like honestly, a little bit surprised that I'm a little bit surprised that it took them this long to change it to have every subsequent upgrade from 1-1 cost 50 minerals and gas more rather than 75.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like this is again, this is just gonna tighten up Terran play in general. This
We
might, well, I mean, this is gonna be a little bit harder, of course, for the Protoss and Zerg to deal with when it comes to these upgrade timings and how much more efficient
Yeah,
Terran's
that
gonna be. But I don't know if that's a bad thing. Like again, this is gonna be
I
a very nice change for Terran
yeah.
players.
I think it can definitely be a bit of a concern though at a very
Mm,
high level. I think for it's one of those skill ceiling things, right? Where this
mhm.
is one of those things where for most players and I would say probably even some of the like tier 3-ish or the semi-pro players, I would say,
Yeah.
it might not change things too much for them because they would just be on top of it anyway. But I think for the very, the very top Terran players in the world, your Clems and your Marus and your Bjorns,
Mhm.
especially the ones who are super fast like Oliveira, they might just be able to end the game much, much quicker this time.
Yeah, there's gonna be some very crisp upgrade timings for those players, like 1-1 and 2-2 timings, and I'm really curious to see how hard they hit and how Zerg players are able to adapt and whether they can, they can survive and make a game out of it and stuff like that. So that is something we're gonna be keeping our eye on 100%. But yeah, it's a very nice, like it's very underrated because it's very boring. It's like, oh, just armory's cheaper, upgrades are cheaper,
No,
but
my
like
friend.
yeah, it's
You
it's
don't
I feel
think
like it
yeah.
could
You
have
don't think about it
consequences.
that yeah, you don't think about it that much until you've been in that position, either on the giving end or the receiving end.
For sure, for sure. Um, but quickly going over, I did want to
Yes.
quickly go back to the Widowmine very quickly
Okay. Yep.
before we get to the
Okay.
cyclone. We're
Okay.
almost there. We're almost.
Okay.
I know
Yep.
you want to talk about it. I can feel it. I can see it. Mr.
Yes.
Yaku, he wants to talk about the cyclone. Very quickly. when it comes to the Widow Mine, we touched on the splash damage radius reduced, and how you spoke about briefly how it is going to
Hmm.
help out when it comes to splitting against Widow Mines, right? With your
Yeah.
probes and to also minimize damage and minimize losses. This is all good. Some unintended changes that could happen, which
Hmm.
I'm concerned by, which isn't addressed when it comes to the
Right.
comments of the Balance Council.
Yeah. Not the forum comments or the Twitter or Reddit comments.
Yeah, well, maybe other people have caught on to it, but this is what I was discussing
Oh,
with
okay.
Frost. Is two things. One, the splash damage radius that is going to straight up impact Widow Mines in ZVZ, sorry TVZ against Ling
TVZ.
Bane. So
Hmm.
big mine shots are going to be smaller against Ling Bane. So that does mean that Zerg players are going to be punished less if there is a big mine shot, or mine shots in general are going to do less to Ling Bane. That is something to bear in mind.
Right.
That is also going to affect against charge lot compositions in the mid game as well, or in general, right? Against like charge lot Archon or zealots and gateway units in general, will be
Yeah.
taking less from Widow Mines.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely something to keep in mind. Obviously,
Mm,
have to we'll have to look at the empirical
yes.
results. Get hecked feet and inches. We'll have to look at the empirical numbers, not the imperial numbers. The empirical results
Mhm.
from this change. But I would say that that is a concern, but it's probably isn't going to be the biggest of concerns because while this can have a bit of a domino effect, especially in TVZ where there's Lings and Banes just cost so little comparatively, so you can just continuously flood them. I would say that by the time we get to that point, the Terran player should have the ability to just have more minds to make up for that. Anyway.
I would hope so. I would hope so. That's why, as you said, that's something that I feel like needs to be monitored. Is the viability of Biomine
Hmm.
against Zerg and against Charger Archon. Not just because of the reduced splash damage, or sorry, the reduced radius of the Widowmine dealing damage, but also because of the more obvious targeting line. That doesn't just
Yeah.
affect worker splitting, but it also means that Ling Bane, it's going to be easier,
That.
slightly easier for Zerg players to split
Yeah.
and peel off and bait out the mine shots. That already happens at pro play. To be
Hmm.
fair, it already does happen. Like Solar, Dark is really good at that.
Dark,
Serral is
Solar,
really good at.
Serral.
Yeah, yeah, they're all really good at it. But now it's going to be a little bit easier for them, and it's going to be a little bit easier for like the tier two. If you, I don't want to call anyone out, but like
Yeah.
just under
You
the
know.
pro players just under them to also pull that
Yeah.
off as well.
Yeah. Definitely. We can very much this can very much lead to a scenario where Widow Mines, by the time we get into the mid game, just aren't utilized at all in pro play because of how well a lot of pro Zerg players and a lot of pro Protoss players will be able to peel away stuff. I mean, you're talking a lot about Dark Serral and Solar, but like players like Hero, players like Max Pax have been getting really good at like baiting out with baiting out Widow Mines with stalkers and then just blinking away.
Yeah, and I think it's not gonna be like cut and dry. I don't think it's gonna be like, oh, Widow mines are useless now. But like, I would imagine it's like, okay, maybe they're like 20 or 30% less effective than they used to be. Like if we think of it like on a graph on like how big mine shots are and how effective and how useful they
Hmm.
are, and they can just be
Well,
reduced a little bit in viability. And
yeah.
is that going to be too much? Is it going to be enough?
I
Like
think
that's something we're gonna have to keep an eye on.
yeah, I think the major question would be less on how will this affect Widowmine shots itself, but how will it affect Widowmines as a zoning tool?
Yeah, exactly. Like typically, right, as you just mentioned, right? They usually zone to zone away and deter an army. But if they don't do that
Hmm.
anymore, then maybe they just become dead supply at a certain point, right? And it's not worth investing because it's so easy to avoid big shots. And if you're not getting big shots, then why invest? That's it.
Yeah.
Well, so we'll keep an eye on that. Um, that's the one thing. The other thing, which I thought was interesting, which was less obvious, is that now that you need drilling claws, so the way that it works is
Hmm.
you need drilling claws, which requires a tech lab on a factory, and you also need an armory to start researching drilling claws as well. Um, I think it's going to be okay against Zerg, but specifically in TVP, very often, especially when you're going mine, you actually don't have a tech lab on your factory. Like you don't really have
Hmm.
room for it because you go for the add-on swap, you get the tech lab for your Raven production, for your Starport, for your Stim, all that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and without cloak for your Widow mines, Specifically, I feel like it's going to affect Zealot run-bys in the mid-game because it means that whenever I feel like you rely a little bit on Widow Mines to protect against like Zealot drops into the main and Zealot run-bys at your third or fourth or fifth
Hmm.
base. And in that period where you don't have Cloak, it does mean that Zealot counterattacks will be killing those Widow Mines, which means that like subsequent wave of Zealots are going to be a little bit harder to deal with, and it could lead into a snowball effect. So I think that's another like side effect that could occur, is dealing with harass, whether it's Zealot run-bys or Ling run-bys or Ling Bane run-bys in the mid game. Before Drilling Claws finishes, I feel like there might be like an awkward moment there where where Terran players might have a harder time defending.
Yeah, definitely definitely something to be a little bit concerned about for Terran players. But yeah, I think maybe best case scenario is we see a few more tank openings, or not tank
Mm,
openings specifically, but you know what I mean. Well, you were mentioning when you're getting Widow Mines, not necessarily as your main unit composition, but more as a defensive unit, and if you can potentially send them to harass, and that's great as well. You're not getting a tech lab, you're not getting drilling claws, but there are definitely styles of Terran in TVP and TVZE that do call for getting tanks earlier on and then switching into Widow Mines after you've researched Drilling Claws. So I think we might be
mm,
seeing a little bit more of those if that is going to be the case. If Widow Mines really are something that a Terran player wants to really utilize, especially like you said against Ling Bane heavy or Chargelet heavy styles.
mm.
I think we might just be seeing a few more tanks, at least in the early mid game.
Yeah, I'm really curious when Terran players are going to start researching Drilling Claws. That's what I'm curious about and how they go about it. Like it's a little bit technical, but yeah, I'm curious how Terran players adapt. Because there is going to be a longer period where I feel like Widow Mines are going to be a little bit less efficient because they're going to be dying a little bit more often without Cloak. In that kind of transition period. So
Hmm.
yeah,
It
that's another interesting thing to keep an
yeah
eye on.
yeah I think probably the main concern in that, or the main concern as a viewer for me would be Terran players not being as active anymore. In this little transition period, not being as active on the map anymore in this little transition period, because as you mentioned,
Mm,
they would have to worry more about chargelets and Ling run-bys, and they can be pretty easily dealt with just bio.
mhm.
But it does also mean that that's bio that you can't put out on the map or you can't
Yeah,
drop with. So it
for
might
sure.
slow down. It might slow down the matchup a little. These matchups a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, that's something to bear in mind when it comes to like maybe an unintended side effect of these changes. Because I feel like a lot of these changes for the Widowmine, as is mentioned by the notes, is supposed to target like how they can harass and how effective they are
Hmm.
at harassing. But it is 100% going to affect like how they interact with armies and harassment as well. So that's something that we have to keep an eye out for because it feels like maybe that wasn't really the intention of the change, but it is going to happen. So yeah, we'll see if like it's a change that's fine anyway, or if it maybe has to be adjusted. Like we'll see.
Yeah, indeed we shall.
Okay, it's time for the Cyclone.
Yes. Not so clown anymore. Hopefully, fingers crossed. We shall see. They still cost about the same amount. They still cost about the same amount of resources to make. They still build much. They still build about this. They take the same amount of time to build, and they can still be made on reactors. So we shall see. But there have been huge changes to how the cyclone itself actually, interacts. Weapon cooldown increase from 0.48 to 0.58, so there's just a little bit more before they can retarget on something else, or not retarget, sorry, a little bit, well, yeah, retarget, not in the sense of them using lock on, which has also been nerfed very significantly. The
Hmm.
timing of the cooldown has been increased from 0 to 2.86. So, we won't be seeing any more scenarios where cyclones are just going to be non-stop firing and running backwards. Uh, and they're also going to take a little while to retarget on other units when they're defending. Damage bonus per weapon upgrade increase from 1 to 2. So this will mean that cyclones, ideally anyway, will scale a little bit better in the later game. A weapon track, the cyclone itself now also has turret tracking, turns faster, and a removed damage points. So that functions basically the same way that a tank or a Colossus does. While they're moving, they can still look at a unit, and so the minute it stops, it doesn't have to turn to shoot. It can just fire immediately. And finally, health increase from 110 to 130, increased by 20. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, a lot of changes. A lot of changes
It,
here to the Cyclone. Uh-huh.
yeah, very, very much like the Cyclone of 2018 ish.
Yeah, I think the biggest change is probably the increased cooldown of lock on, right?
Hmm.
Like that was the biggest change made to it is the fact that it had no cooldown, which was huge. It was crazy. And now they're putting the cooldown back on it. Which I appreciate. Uh
Yep.
it's gonna be interesting though, because it's gonna become a very different unit. It's gonna lose a lot of the power it once had. Um I really wanted to quickly talk about the theory behind these changes. Um, they're specifically
Hmm.
talking about all-ins. So quickly, just reading it out. After the Cyclone rework in the last patch, the Cyclone has caused problems for Protoss players at the professional level as a follow-up to NGBA block strategies. Blocking the natural expansion, causing them to expand to a further base. That's a long way of saying unnatural natural. Yes. As Hellion Drop and Cyclone Pressure are now both difficult strategies to deal with, while appearing similar from a scouting perspective. Cyclones also have been difficult to deal with in early game TVT, causing games to often end up in Mass Cyclone versus Mass Cyclone in early games and in various all-ins at lower levels of play. So
Indeed.
I wanted to bring this up because this is all true um, from December and January. Because we've casted plenty of games like this,
Right.
and all of this was very applicable a couple of months ago. Fun fact: eBay blocks are still happening, but because of the all-in that they're referring to, which used to happen, it doesn't happen anymore because Protoss players have
Yeah.
adapted, and Protoss players no longer take the unnatural natural. It's specifically because of that all-in that they're referring to that doesn't happen anymore, and we don't see those all-ins anymore. And now Protoss players, you just pull. You've seen it, right? You just pull like 6 probes,
Yep.
and you focus on the eBay. You cancel it, and then you just take a later expansion. That's how
Yep.
Protoss players adapted to it. So the all-in that they're referring to actually doesn't happen anymore. But I guess with the change to the Cyclone, it does. It I think it just removes eBay blocks actually. And
Yeah.
Protoss players will just have an easier time expanding.
Yeah. Well, quality of life.
Yeah. So that's
Might not.
it's just go on.
Yeah, I was gonna say it might not be as massive as they. It might not lead to the massive results that they're thinking of, but
Mhm.
it's still, I think, inadvertently gonna achieve the same result.
Yeah, yeah. So this, so like, the reason why I bring it up is just because like the rationale is an odd one, just because referring to this quote
Yeah.
unquote
Well.
issue we're having, it isn't really
Mhm.
an issue anymore, just because we don't see it
Yeah.
anymore. Just I guess
Hmm.
because like the meta of StarCraft shifts quite quickly,
Hmm.
and basically post IEM and even just before IEM, like eBay blocks and Cyclone all-ins, they're out of favor, like they're not
Yep.
seen anymore.
Not in TVP anyway.
True.
As yeah, there is a little something else I wanted to address here, which is of course the difficulty of dealing with cyclones in early game TVT when you, as the Terran player, don't build cyclones against a player who does.
Mhm.
This
Yeah.
this was something that you were yelling at me about just 2 nights ago, or this was
we
something you
were
were lecturing me about like 2 nights ago.
we were going over TBT a couple of nights ago. You're not wrong. I think the other interesting here, and the thing that's a little bit odd about this, just when it comes to their rationale, is mass cyclone versus mass cyclone isn't as common as it once was. It was very
Yeah.
common December and January. But as we were going over, there are a lot of the Korean Terrans that have actually stopped opening Cyclone. And I think we were specifically going
It.
over an Oliveira
Yeah.
build, which Bjorn has been doing,
Mhm.
which is where they've been adopting this like tank, this earlier tank style to just avoid Cyclone v Cyclone altogether.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
been a little bit more popular
yeah.
recently.
You say that, but I think the most standard build right now is still Cures.
Yeah.
Continue to make cyclones, even if you do nothing with them. Just keep making them because they'll pay off eventually.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where, in the absence of this patch, the meta has been shifting and players have been like trying to work around it, right? And players have been avoiding it. But as you mentioned, if both players open and commit to cyclones, you end up in cyclone wars, right? Like
Yep,
if both players start making cyclones, you don't stop and you keep making them. And it's
it's an
very
arms
similar
race.
to it's very similar to PvP Phoenix versus Phoenix, where like
Hmm.
when one player starts making Phoenixes, you have to keep making them as well, otherwise you just die.
Yep.
And the game ends. Um, so that is probably something that people want to avoid. And even though the meta is shifting and players are adjusting to it to avoid that themselves, this just might just kill it anyway. Just it might just be it might just
Thank Christ.
yeah.
I don't want any mites going on with how the meta is shifting.
Uh-huh. You're like, players are working on it and they're trying to get rid of it and they might succeed, or we might just still devolve into Cyclone v Cyclone. It's like, oh, okay. We we need to
No,
we
I
need to
don't.
put a stop to
Yeah,
that.
exactly. You know, they might come up with new ways to play TVT, or they might just continue doing it. I don't want that ambiguity. Get rid of
True.
it. And obviously, the Cyclone's still going to be a very useful unit to have for Terran early on in the game, especially defensively. I mean, even outside of the TVT matchup, a Cyclone can definitely be helpful against something like a Warp Prism early on, or something like a drop early on if your opponent is going Cyclones. But ideally, with the changes to the lock on cooldown and with the changes to the cooldowns in general, this is just going to allow Cyclones in the early game to just be that defensive unit instead of ending the game by going across the map with a whole mass of them.
I also think one of the biggest side effects of this, I do think it is going to be a big side effect, is I think this will negatively impact how good Cyclones are in Battle Mech against Zerg. Uh
Okay, yeah.
Removing lock
Nice.
on, or sorry, increasing the cooldown for lock on is huge for Battle Mech for like
In
Cyclone
TVZ
Hellion.
specifically, yeah.
Yeah, in TVZ. And that is going to be a big nerf to mech against Zerg. Um, that's something that I mean, personally, I'm happy with because like screw mech against Zerg. Like, I
Yeah.
don't like, but at the same time, like I don't know if that's what they want. But we have seen really oppressive mass cycling against Zerg. I'm specifically thinking about Hero Marine. Marine, he
Hmm.
has it was at Homestar Cup and at IEM, he went Mass Cyclone against Scarlet a couple of
Yep.
times, and it looked terrifying. Beyond has been doing it. I think Beyond did it against DRG recently, and it was disgusting. Uh,
Hmm.
and maybe that's something we don't want
Well,
in the game.
yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe. We'll see how it works because I get what you're saying that with this lock on cooldown increase, it's going to make Cyclones less viable as like a main unit in in your army
Mhm.
composition. But yeah, actually, that might be a little bit of a concern there for Battle Mech specifically. I think Cyclones will still have their place as a harassment
Mhm.
unit in Battle Mech TVZ. You can still get a bunch of them to lock onto buildings, or you can still use, well, I guess in most scenarios, you're not going to be using it to snipe tech. But in the off chance that a Zerg player, for some reason, decides to build their spire in the middle of the map or what have you, yeah, you can still send out a Cyclone hit squad to take it out, but that will definitely weaken Battle Mech quite a bit in TVZ specifically.
Yeah. And I think that just comes down to like the goal of the balance council, right? Like, do we
It,
want to get rid of it? Like, do we
yeah.
want mech to be worse than what it is against Zerg? Do we not? Do we want it to be
Well,
viable? Right? It's
yeah,
like it's yeah, it's something that we have to ask ourselves. I feel.
yeah. I'm trying to think right now what would be the alternative to having Cyclones as your main unit in a mech TVZ composition. I can't really think of too many except for just getting more Hellbats, which at that point it's no longer Battle Mech. It's traditional Siege Mech.
Yeah, exactly. Which again, maybe is a good thing because like pure cyclone mech, it looks disgusting.
Yep.
And maybe we do want to avoid that. So yeah, that's just
Yeah. Well.
another side effect that's going to be occurring because of this.
Yeah. So those are the things that I personally can't come up with any big predictions of how it's going to go out. So yeah, we'll just wait to
Mhm.
see how players uh, how players utilize New Cyclone. And
Yeah,
if it is,
it's
and maybe it is still viable, it just
yeah.
takes it's something just needs to click, where we'll just have to wait for Gumiho to figure out what that is.
I was gonna say like the problem with seeing how this changes mech versus Zerg is that mech is very niche at the pro level, right? Like
Hmm.
as you just mentioned, who plays mech? Gumiho, you know, Maru, Clem, and beyond. They do
Maru
it like
recently,
yeah,
every
they
now and
have
then, yeah.
they do sprinkle it in, but right, they sprinkle it in, like once in a best of five, or like once in a best of three, maybe like once a month sort of thing.
Hmm.
Like they don't rely on it too heavily. Same with like Humorine and stuff like that. They dabble in it, but
Oh
they don't
yeah,
really embrace it too much. So it's gonna be it's gonna I feel like it's gonna take a while for us to really get a feel for how it is changed.
yeah, definitely. Man, who else plays mech?
Ryung and TVT, right?
Ryung does play it in TVT, but that's CVT, so
Yeah.
that doesn't help us. That doesn't help us too much here in TVZ.
True, true. Uh, but yeah, big
Yeah.
changes to the Cyclone, and
Yes, I cannot
it's
wait. If they end up, if after all of the playing and after all the feedback they decide, you know what, actually, we're not gonna go live with the cyclone change, specifically because of what you said, but specifically because players have learned to adapt against it. I'm gonna be not
Mhm.
playing the game for a while.
Yeah.
That's how I'll put it.
And with that, I also wanted to quickly add, Cyclone v Cyclone was turning into Phoenix versus
It.
Phoenix. Um,
Yep.
are they gonna ever do
I.
anything about Phoenix versus Phoenix?
We'll see. Yeah, it might be one of those things where it's like, how's the saying go? The greasy wheel gets the squeaky wheel gets the grease. There we go.
Yeah.
Like we don't see Phoenix v Phoenix that much anymore on the pro level, which I personally don't really know why. I still think it's pretty. I still think Phoenix is still a pretty effective style to go for, but yeah, for some reason we're just not seeing Phoenix v Phoenix in PvP, but we are seeing a lot of Cyclone v Cyclone in TPT. So
Well,
yeah, that's
the
why they decide to address it.
Yeah, the reason why I brought it up is because we have been seeing more Phoenix versus Phoenix. The past like month, I've been seeing a lot of it in PvP. The reason for it, just to like explain it, is Max Packs. Of course, you know him for like the gate expand, right? Gate expand into Stargate, like the Max Packs opener, like really greedy openers in PvP. Recently, a lot of the other pro players have stopped all inning. When I
Mhm.
say pro players, I mean like Hero, Classic, Showtime. They've stopped all inning against Max Packs, and they also go gate expand into Stargate. And because they both open up economically, and because they both open up Stargate, it
Ah,
leads into Phoenix versus Phoenix, and
yes.
that has been more common over the past couple of weeks. I say couple of weeks, maybe since January, maybe February, January-ish. So it's been like a recent thing. Maybe it dies out, maybe they start all inning again. I do believe, to be fair, I do think that a lot of it is map based. So I think if we get new
Mhm.
maps, and
Yeah.
if it's harder to get away with greedy openers, then
Yep.
maybe that just stops Phoenix Wars.
Yeah. I think that's what they're probably going to be waiting for.
Mhm.
That, and also the fact that it's been 1 month that we see Phoenix versus Phoenix, which uh, compared to the 1, 2, 3, 4 months of Cyclone v Cyclone.
True, true. Speaking of PvP, oh wait, before that,
Uh,
Raven. The Raven
yes,
change is actually really nice. I love
yes,
it.
huge quality of life change. I've played
Yeah.
probably 3 or 4. I played probably 3 or 4 games in this past couple of days where I have straight up thrown in thrown down interference matrix on a unit that was already matrix. So I
Yeah.
mean, just to read out the change, interference matrix can no longer target units that have already been targeted or are affected by interference matrix. So it's not a case of you have to throw it down and then you're safe. No, no, no. If you even targeted it, a unit, a tank, a cyclone, cyclone's on my mind. I meant to say Colossus, a Colossus or whatever, you cannot double up anymore, which is, thank Christ. I'm
It
glad for it. It's a change that, not gonna lie, I saw it floated around a while ago, and I was thinking,
Mhm.
just don't double target forehead. But now that I actually see it's becoming implemented, I'm like, oh, thank you.
I mean, I'll be honest. I've casted games where two names come to mind. Gumio and
Yep,
Byun. They've done that before. Gumio and
yep.
Byun. It
To
doesn't
each
happen often.
other.
I remember it was Gumiho. I think it was Gumiho versus Creator. It was Gumiho versus a Protoss player, and he double matrixed. It wasn't even a
Colossus.
Colossus. I think he double
Oh.
matrixed the Disruptor.
Oh.
And so then the other Disruptor, the Nova goes off, sort of thing. Like it doesn't happen often, but it's happened before, and it shouldn't be happening. Like
Yes.
I feel like
It
this is a change that should have been there from the beginning. I
yeah.
think we're all happy
It
with it. It's fine.
yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody's going to be mad at it anyway. Like, sure, maybe it's going to be a little bit easier for Terran players to target more than just one unit at a time. But I think for the most part, whether you're a Terran player, you're a Zerg player, you're a Protoss player, you know that when you see that Raven coming towards you, you have to prepare against it. You have to prepare for the worst. You have to assume that they are going to
Mhm,
be able to throw out two interference matrices per Raven if they have max energy. So yeah, I think
mhm.
going to be most players are going to be able to prepare against it anyway. It's just
Yeah.
nice. It's just nice for the player who's on the giving end of that to not smoge after double interference matrixing the same tank and be like, I could have won that engagement.
Yeah, yeah. It's just good. It's just good. It's just a good change. It's all good. I think even Protoss players will love it. It's fine. I think
Yeah.
they're understanding of it, so it's all good. And they even get something similar later on down the line as well. Because
Mhm.
now we enter the Protoss changes.
Indeed, we do. We're doing it a little bit different this time, going Terran Protoss Zerg instead of Protoss. No, Terran Zerg Protoss, but here we
Mhm,
go. And then going into the Protoss changes. So the first one is a little bit interesting. It is going to be a sentry change. Damage has been increased from just a flat 6 DPS to 6, but an additional 4 damage for a total of 10 versus units that have shields. And the
mhm.
light tag has been removed.
This is great. I spoke
This.
earlier
Mhm.
about how like DT openers are similar to like the Armory Widowmine builds that can just end the game. This is a nice way to help Protoss in general be safe. You know how chaotic PvP can be. You know how
Yep.
important scouting is. And this is just
Yep.
a way like,
It,
hey guys, sentry openers are just better. So just make sentries so you can scout.
exactly. Just make them for it.
Just make him.
The,
And yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Really nice. A really nice quality of life change here being made to the Sentry, and they put the rationale as well. This is to
Mhm.
change PvP specifically, make sure that the early game isn't super chaotic, make sure that
Mhm.
sentries don't immediately die to Adept to Oracle
Yep.
openings, and have things kind of snowball from there. But I can imagine this also being pretty useful in PvZ as well.
Mhm.
Banelings will no longer one shot. Will no longer. Do they one shot sentries? I have to check that. Regardless,
Uh yeah.
sentries are going to be that much less vulnerable to banelings, and obviously, might be thinking, well, if you're getting sentries, you probably already have force fields. You never know.
Yeah, 100%. And like this is such a big change for PvP. As you're mentioning, like so often we see like sentry-based openers and then Adept Shade in or an Orca goes in, we
Yep.
snipe a high energy sentry, and then bam, that
Yep.
was already a big investment, and now you won't be able to scout, and now you don't know that there's like an all-in coming, or you don't know your opponent's being greedy and you can punish it. Like losing sentries is so brutal in PvP, and just making them a little bit tankier and making them again more viable or just better in general, I think is a good thing. And with how they
Yep.
change it, I do think it's going to affect PvP the most. And I think
Absolutely.
a lot of people hate how coin flippy
I
it can be, and this makes it slightly less coin flippy.
Yeah. Without a doubt, this is going to be huge for PvPs. This is going to be just be less frustrating for Protoss players in general. Every
Mhm.
Whenever we get to our weekly PvP finals in whether it's CSL Asia or Kung Fu Cup or what have you, yeah, I think
Uh-huh.
we're going to be seeing a lot less of a coin flip, as you put it, a lot fewer big risks. I would say. I still think that a lot of high level Protoss players are still just risk takers, players like Hero, players like Classic, but yeah, we're not going to see huge. We're not going to see huge all-ins or anything like that coming down from them just because of this just because of this addition. As a
For
side
sure.
note, since we were talking about team games earlier on, I cannot wait for Mass Sentry team games again.
You're an animal.
That extra damage versus shields. Oh boy.
That's where your brain went immediately. You're like, team games. Oh, it's beautiful. It's a good 10 out of 10 change. Team
Oh,
games.
is this the? I would have to double check. Is this no? Because I think the widow. I was gonna say, is this the only unit that does bonus damage against shields? But I believe the widow mine does do bonus against shields.
I think so. I think so. But yeah, that's gonna be the century change. We have a pylon change, site
Yep.
increase from 9 to 10. Again,
No rationale given for this, so
it's
we can
just
just
good
move
though.
on.
Yeah, it's just good though. It's hey,
Yeah,
basically,
it
it's
is
like,
nice.
hey, you know what? Now it's easier to scout like drop play.
Yeah,
Now it's easier to scout run by. It's just scouting in general going to
yeah.
be slightly better here for Protoss.
Yeah, I think this is probably a very needed change for Protoss in general, especially as we get into the mid and the late game, because obviously Terran, in addition to scan, we also have sensor towers. Zerg obviously has overlords that they can place in key positions. For Protoss, it was observers, which obviously cost supply, so you don't want to be getting too many observers at the cost of your own army, or spotter pylons, which I guess this is still something that is going to be used here for Protoss, more spotter pylons on the map, but with this change, they can put them in safer positions instead of risking 100 minerals and a bunch of potential supply out in the middle of the map just to get sniped.
Yeah, this is just like another way to assist Protoss against drop play in PvT, which can be very
Hmm.
oppressive and can be difficult to keep up with. So, again, it's just addressing TvP in another way, and it's just going to make it a little bit easier for Protoss players to scout and react in time. Of course, they still have to put them in good positions. They still have to have
Yeah,
the reaction to deal with it. It's just going to be a little bit easier for that. So, I feel like a
yeah.
good change for Protoss.
Hmm.
And likewise, speaking of scouting, the Observer was also adjusted as well.
Yes, quite a pretty hefty buff here coming out for the Observer. I believe this
Mhm.
was something that was experimented with a while ago, and they've always been trying to tinker with it to find the right balance. But this time, this might be it. Build time has been reduced from 21.4 to 17.9 seconds, so you can get observers out quicker. Uh, this will definitely help in PvP as well. I
It
would
will, yeah, it
imagine.
will.
I will imagine. They're a little bit beefier now. They have slightly more shields, still the same 40 health, but now they have 30 shields instead of 20. So, yeah, they can survive a couple more hits from something like a Marine or whatnot. And the model size has been increased, but the animation speed of going in and out of surveillance mode has been massively increased as well.
Yeah,
So it
this
will.
is go on.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's gonna be a lot more responsive for
Mhm.
Protoss players if they queue up their observer or whatnot. And they say, okay, I'm gonna go in here, I'm gonna siege them up. If they suddenly see, oh wait, there are Marines there, or there's detection there, or what have you, they can much quicker just pull away, and they don't have to wait for the whole. I'm gonna siege up now, and oh, I'm being shot at. I'm gonna unsiege now. It's like siege up, unsiege.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's really good. It does mean that you can be faster with your control of the observer. You can have more micro potential with it. As is being stated here, the shield change means that an observer survives against the splash damage of a Widow Mine, which means
Oh yes.
unintentional splash damage won't kill observers anymore. It does mean that intentional targeting by the Widowmine will still kill the observer.
Hmm.
So if the Terran player goes for like the scan to kill an observer, then they can still kill it that way. Or if they just manually target it, then they can still kill it that way.
Hmm.
But it won't be like a byproduct of a
Yeah.
Widowmine shot
It
going off.
it's mostly for major engagements, right?
Yeah.
Where in the past, when we would have marine mine armies or biomine armies going up against Protoss players who only have one or two observers, and all of a sudden, in the middle of everything, their observers who weren't fast enough to retreat get caught in the splash damage, they die,
Mhm.
and then they can't do anything about the rest of the widow mines as the Terran player just sieges down a base. So yeah, I think this will definitely help out a lot for defense specifically for Protoss players.
100%, 100%. So that's going to be huge when it comes to defending against or going up against mines in big battles. As you mentioned, because the build time is reduced, I do think that's going to mainly influence PvP just because it comes out a little bit faster. I mean, in
Mm-hmm.
general, it's going to be nice because
Well,
it
yeah,
means you get out on the map faster, you
get
get to
yeah,
scout faster, like everything's faster by like 3
mm-hmm.
seconds or 4 seconds. So
Yeah,
that's just, yeah, a
and
nice little
yeah,
buff.
it also means that it's probably going to make DTs less effective in PvP, which
Maybe, yeah.
Potentially. Either way, if it does, then that's great. If it doesn't, then not the biggest deal.
There you go. And the final Protoss change, we spoke about the change to
Mhm.
the Raven, and this is a very similar change where feedback can no longer target units with zero energy. So now, if you
Yes.
spam feedback, you won't waste feedbacks where they otherwise wouldn't have been, or you just waste them and where they otherwise could have been used elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we have to bring this up because sometimes it's a little bit of a misconception of how feedback works. It scales to the energy of your opponent's units,
Mhm.
not the unit of High Templar. So if your High
Yeah,
Templar is full energy, feedback is still going to cost the same. Feedback is still going to cost the same amount. But if your opponent has higher energy, they're going to take more damage. If a medevac or a queen or what have you has higher energy, they've been saving that up for a while, they are going to take more damage.
yeah, exactly. And now you
And
won't
so,
waste
yeah,
any feedbacks on them if you spam it.
exactly. If there's zero energy on that unit, you literally do like zero damage.
Yeah.
Not literally zero, but it might as well be zero.
So yeah, it's nice
You
to see
barely
that
tickled
quality of
him.
life. Yeah, it's nice to be that quality of life change. Very similar to the Raven change. So both players or both races get their own version of that, which is very good. And there are only a handful of Zerg changes as well. We do
Yeah.
have creep radius increase from 12 to 13, which is interesting. Apparently, the rationale for this
Hmm.
was when it comes to natural based layouts.
Ah,
So
I see. Yep.
yeah, yeah. So now there's a little bit more creep. Now you can have a little bit more freedom.
Yeah.
Apparently, the other thing this will a little bit change is maybe cannon rushes as well, just because there's going to be more creep surrounding your base.
Hmm.
But again, that's a very niche area, and cannon rushes aren't too common at the pro level anyway.
Yeah. Not
Um,
anymore.
no,
I miss
feels party, man.
2021.
The big change, though, the big change for Zerg is the
Yes.
Infestor, and I'm a Zerg player. I'm perfectly fine with this. It's been a couple of years. It's been a couple of years since like Dark popularized this. I don't know if you remember, but Dark versus Mara. I remember GSL. I think it was like 2021 or something, where
Yep.
he'd have like borrowed infestors all over the place. Going for neurals or going for neurals on Ghost to EMP the ghosts of Maru or
Yes.
fungling the army. And it's cool. It's
It.
impressive. But Zerg players have gotten very good at using them, and it's become a lot more common and
Yep.
a lot more oppressive.
Yeah. Yeah. Without a doubt, I feel for you, Migs. It was. Yeah. I feel for you, Megs, and I think it was something we also saw Cyril do a lot of in Katowice as well.
Yep.
In
Yep.
ZVTs specifically, borrowed infestors out in the map, or even before that,
Mhm.
in Yon Shopping, I think he also was
Yep.
using it a ton. But by the time Katowice came around, I think it became more meta in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
It really started to catch on. Just getting a bunch of infestors, fanning them out on the map, and
Yep.
just using them to mess, to really contain and mess with your Terran opponents. Uh, and of course, this will probably make them less effective. Obviously, fungal
Mhm.
growth range, so the uh, range of how long you can actually cast fungal growth is going to be much larger from 9 to 10. I say much, it's one increase
Mhm.
from 9 to 10, but everything else is a nerf. So you can cast it from a farther distance away, but your borrowed vision will be a lot less than that at only 8.
Mhm.
So it's going to be a little bit trickier for a Zerg player to look for these opportunities to unburrow and get a fungals. And speaking of unburrowing, time has been increased from 0.36 seconds to 0.71 seconds. And so it will mean that it's not as automatic as it used to be for a Zerg player to unburrow and then fungal, or unburrow and then, well, I guess technically you can neuro while borrowed, but so certainly this is going to affect fungals, and
Mhm.
something that's going to help a lot in the counterplay: increased size of moving borrowed infestor visuals. So it's going to be a lot easier for Terran players, and I guess all players, whether it is Zerg or Protoss, but since it's mostly affecting ZVT, it's going to be a lot easier for Terran players to catch them in the middle of the map. It's going to be, I imagine, a little bit more difficult to hide borrowed infestors under armies.
Yeah, I mean, you said the key word there, Yaku, and that's the case that we always want, and that is counterplay. We want some counterplay available, and the Infestor was a little bit too unforgiving, right? Where the
Yes.
Infestor would quickly unburrow, fungal your army, and then you'd lose everything,
Yep.
right? Like the Lingbane would roll in and you just lose everything, and it was so difficult for Terran players to anticipate that. They needed to really like hone in and try to catch like the shifting ground to get eyes on the Infestor, or just happen to scan it, or EMP in time before the fungal went off. It was just so
Yeah.
difficult, and too
Oh.
difficult. And I can get behind this because it does mean that now Terran players will have the chance to EMP in time when it does on Burrow, or even
Yep.
just catch the
Or
Infestor before it
yeah.
can get anything off.
Yeah. Absolutely. Scan to snipe it, or even just EMPing the
Mhm.
area that is a little bit darker. Because fun fact, EMP might not reveal a borrowed unit, but it does drain energy still
Yeah,
while the
yeah, it
unit's
still
borrowed.
works for sure, for sure.
So yeah,
So yeah, I can 100% get behind this because like again, the idea
yep.
of just more
I
counterplay in my mind is always a
yeah.
good thing.
Without a doubt. I imagine that we'll be seeing a bit more late game TVZs coming down. So it's not just going to be Clem and Maru who will go into the late game in TVZ anymore. I
Mhm.
imagine this might make it a little easier for the other players too.
For sure, for sure. So good change overall. And the last Zerg change is Transport Overlord morph time increased
Yeah.
from 12 to 15 seconds. Transport Overlord movement speed increased from 1.10 to 1.28 seconds. And this is an
The,
interesting one.
I
Go on.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. This feels like the most random change out of all of the out of all of the patch notes. But
Mhm,
even reading the rationale, where they say that they did change they did change Morpholords. No, they did change Dropper Lords in the previous
mhm.
patch, but it didn't really affect any utility of Droppers. So they're gonna try to make it a little bit stronger this time, or rather, make it a little bit faster to move them to move units around with already pre-made Dropper Lords, as opposed to quickly making them to harass or anything like that. But yeah, I'm not sure if this really will affect anything.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, making the Overlord faster, slightly faster, will mean that drop harass is going to be a little bit more effective. So I do like that. Increasing the morph time, I think the byproduct of that, which I think is a good thing, is that now you get a little bit more that players can get a little bit more time to scout a queen all in, like a queen Ling or a queen Roach all
Yeah,
in, when you morph in the Dropper Lord. So Terran and Protoss players alike can maybe get more time to confirm that. So I do like that just because we have seen a lot of that recently, especially on maps like Hardlet or maps like Oceanborn. There's been a lot of like a lot of queen-based all-ins and like German taxis. So I think that's good. And I do think that the movement speed doesn't necessarily buff that too much. It just buffs harassment overall. It will impact though a little bit as well.
potentially.
Um, because it does mean
Yeah,
that queens get across the
yeah,
map a little bit faster.
yeah. Queens will get across the map a little bit faster, but I guess the actual timing of getting drop lords will be increased a little bit. I do feel like when it comes to something like all ins, this
Mhm,
probably won't. Hmm, maybe. This might not change. I was gonna say this might not change things too much, because I feel like if a Zerg player was already gonna go for a all in, for a queen all in, they're already committed. This extra
mhm,
couple of seconds probably isn't gonna change too much, because if they're already gotten to that point, they're going
mhm.
for it. And maybe we'll see less of those. Maybe we'll see players less willing to take that risk. But I just have a little bit of a gut feeling that I doubt it. As when it comes to the movement speed itself, I feel like that will probably mainly affect ZVZ. And I mean, we're probably not going to be seeing Drop Lord harass in ZVT or in ZVP. I mean, we
Yeah, as
already
you
see
mentioned,
so little of it to begin with.
exactly. Like drop alert harass is more common in ZVZ, 100%. It's like the meta. Once you get into the mid games, you go for like Roach drop alert harass and like Baneling drop alert harass. Just because there's very limited anti air. So yeah, like hopefully it like incentivizes players to use them in other matchups. But as you mentioned, it's mainly seen against other Zerg players. So yeah, it's an interesting one. We'll see if anything comes of it. It's
Yeah, we'll
yeah.
just have to wait for someone like for Shin to figure out a build.
True. There
For
you go.
Shin to figure it
Shin.
out.
Yeah, Shin and Dark. We need them to get cooking. Um,
Yeah.
and just under that, we have
We need
the. Well, I
God
mean,
to
that's
cook
all
some
the.
shin
We
ramen.
we do. After all of that, we do have the final changes. There were
Man.
some general changes done to workers, which we already kind of spoke about. We spoke about like the rocks that die off over time. We spoke about
Hmm.
the minerals that can be destroyed as well. There are also some bug fixes, which is always a good thing. I know there was a really popular bug on Reddit about the Bailings doing more damage on the ramp, which was wild. Thankfully, that has been
Yeah.
fixed.
Yep. And that was already fixed, right? No, this is going to be fixed. Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be fixed. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I never noticed it.
Oh, good.
Maybe
Oh,
you know
good.
what? Maybe that will change things. Maybe that was the main reason why
True.
we see the best Zerg players beating out Protoss in tournaments.
Uh huh. There you go.
Just fix this one bug. Don't implement any changes already. We'll see
Mhm,
PVZ and TVZ win rates going up.
mhm. There you go. There you go. So some nice little bug changes. I remember there was one bug that stood out. Oh, where is it?
Which race? Which unit? Because I
Okay, sorry.
might know what you're thinking about.
Well, it says feedback can no longer target units with no energy. Apparently, that was a bug fix, but
Oh,
we already went over it. So that was
yeah.
that
Oh
was the
well,
biggest one for me. Uh,
that was a bug.
Apparently, that was a bug. Yeah, that's what they called it. It's a bug.
But the chain, huh?
It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a couple of issues that
Immortal.
were with the game. Mhm.
Yeah. Immortal now properly tracks the last unit that they attacked. Not the biggest thing. Lurkers now
Oh,
have a higher priority rather than Ravagers when you're, having them in the same control group.
yeah, there was another one with the Immortal. Hold on. Very quickly, there was if we look at the patch notes, regarding force fields, right?
With Immortals?
Yeah. Okay. Fix an issue where immortals will not fire while surrounded by units or partially covered by force fields. You would know this, right? When
Yes.
if you
Yes.
surround an immortal with force fields, or if they get stuck like in a force
Yep.
field, then they kind of like they shake their legs and they kind of like
Yep.
stuck and they can't do anything. I didn't know that was a bug. I thought that was intentional. I thought it's like, oh, they just get
It
trapped. But apparently that was unintentional.
I was gonna say, yeah, when units get surrounded, I assumed it was a case where players were rallying them back rather than holding them, or rather than hitting S and stopping their movement to actually attack them. But apparently, it's a bug.
Yeah, and that's been a thing for since the inception of the game.
It
But
has.
yeah. So I guess
Uh,
now immortals will be able to fire even if they get like surrounded
yeah.
and choked up by force fields.
Hmm.
That's a
Yeah, I
nice
assume
little change.
like with the force field, I like that. I could imagine being a bug because it's like that. I could imagine being a bug because of like tracking and whatnot.
Mhm.
But the units thing, that is news to me. I cannot believe that that's I cannot believe that that's been in the game for Lord knows how long.
Yeah, yeah.
It might be a recent bug. It might have been there since 2010.
Regardless, yeah, it's an interesting patch overall, Yaku, where it is meant to help out Protoss against Protoss in the Protoss versus Terran matchup. I think it
Hmm.
will. I'm mostly keeping my eye out for some of the unintentional changes that are going to be happening, specifically with the Cyclone and the Widowmine, because I do think that these changes are going to impact TVZ against the Terran player. And I'm curious. I'm curious how things will settle. Right when it comes to the Widowmine, the splash damage radius, sorry, the radius being reduced for the Widowmine and the Drilling Claw upgrade. Same with the Cyclone against Zerg as well. So yeah, that's what I'm mostly keeping my eye out for.
Yeah, I do agree.
And
I'm
also
mostly
against
just putting.
go on.
I was just gonna say I'm keeping my eye out for no more Clone Wars and Enter the Clone Wars.
True,
Bring
true.
on Revenge of the BC. I don't know what the Terran Sith unit would be.
Revenge of the Ghost, Papi. Revenge of the Ghost.
Let's
Let's go.
go.
And also, I'm gonna keep my eye out for Widowmines against Charger Archon, right? And
Yeah,
see how their effectiveness is against run buys as well. Like in general, it's gonna be an interesting time seeing the changes to the
hmm
Widowmine and how Terran players adapt. Um,
yeah,
yeah, it's gonna be an interesting patch
yeah. Gonna be keeping my eyes on a couple of streams who of players who every time there's a PTR being thrown down, you know they're gonna be streaming it and you know looking at the different changes.
for sure, for sure. And yeah, exciting times ahead of us. You know, new map pool, new patch. I think a lot of people are going to be wondering when is it going to be dropped. We don't know.
Yeah.
It's currently in PTR. My
hmm
theory is I don't know if they want to go live with this
I
patch for DreamHack Dallas, which is in like a month or two. I know that
right.
yeah, DreamHack Dallas is on the horizon. Um, so I'm curious if they want it for DreamHack Dallas, or if you remember, right after DreamHack Dallas is Gamers 8. It's
Yep.
the
Or
World
esports World
Finals.
Cup. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Esports World Cup. So I'm curious if they want it for one or the other, but it's
Will
it's going to be for one of them, I imagine.
yeah. It has to be. I mean, I think usually if there's like nothing to change, if there's no, I'm not gonna say no feedback, or if there's like no significant feedback, if it's like, yeah, we like these changes, but you can maybe tweak the numbers a little bit. Usually, I think it takes about 2 weeks, but
Mhm.
yeah, if there is going to be significant changes to be made, then they are going to be, they will be implemented. It will take longer to implement them.
For sure, for sure. So I'm hedging my bets on maybe in time for DreamHack Dallas, bearing in mind that next month April, because I think DreamHack Dallas is in May, like end of May, I think. Um, but in April is Stars War 11.
Yep.
I don't know if you've heard of the Chinese event that's going on, and I it should be after that. I feel because I don't think they want that event to be influenced by the patch and by
Yeah.
like a shaky like kind of release. So I
Yeah.
imagine like after that and before DreamHack Dallas, maybe I don't know.
Potentially. Yeah. Because the thing is, it is a pretty major event. You know, there's a lot of
Mm,
participation in it. Some of the best players are playing in it. It is technically a major, so it's not a big premier tournament, but
mhm.
when you still get some of the best players in the world competing in it, you do want to make sure that they have time to acclimate, or you do want to make sure that things aren't. You don't drop any big like surprises on them before the tournament's played.
Yeah, you don't want to negatively impact obviously a premier event, but a major event either, right? I would imagine that ESL are aware of the
hmm
schedule of these tournaments and they don't want to hurt them. So
Yeah.
that's why I would imagine it would be after Stars War 11. But I'm only assuming maybe they don't care. Maybe they're like, yo, it's not one of our events. Screw it. We'll just we'll just drop it anyway, right in the middle of like the semis
Yeah.
or something.
I would
That probably
love
won't
that.
happen. You're like,
Let's
for the
go.
chaos.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Obviously, yeah. It's weird. Obviously, because there is. Yeah, it's weird. Obviously, because after Stars War, but before Dallas, there is probably like 1 week, which is
Mhm.
probably really good to drop the patch on because it will still be before, it will still give players enough time to adapt by the time Dallas comes around, but obviously it will be after Stars War. But like we said, if there are more changes to be made and it does get delayed a bit longer, then who knows? Who knows? Maybe they might just decide, yeah, we'll have to throw it down and just we'll have to make it go live by a certain point. And if there are major events happening between them, then they just have to revert patch
Yeah.
or something.
We'll have to wait and see. Well, we can only speculate about that. Only speculate. But yeah, with that, just quickly going over it, giving our thoughts on the patch. Our annual podcast has now returned,
hmm
and we'll be back next year.
Yeah. We'll be back next year with even more patches.
We'll try and come out a little bit more regularly with this. If we ever have something to talk about, we'll try and make something happen. No promises, but we'll see. We'll see.
Indeed, we shall.
Yeah.
Indeed, we
With
shall.
that. Yeah, with that, a big shout out to if you want to support us, Patreon, exclamation mark Patreon in the chat if we were live. We do have a Patreon, we do have all our social media. Shout out to Kuro, by the way. Kuro has been handling the production.
Yes.
She has been recording, so big shout out to Kuro.
Yes.
Yeah.
For huge shout out Sakuro, our photograph Bushkitori Jrabil Willy Footer.
The hell are you saying?
Yes. Google
Thank you,
Translate
Yaku,
that
for
shit.
joining me. Thank you, Yaku, for
Thank
joining me
you.
today.
Yeah. Thank you, Light, for saving me from smudging on ladder.
You were smudging so hard, mate. You were. I remember talking to Karen before this, and she's like, "Yo, Yaku just faced off and lost to 5 Colossus." I'm like, and she was like, "He's smudging so hard." I'm like, "Yo, now is a good time to talk about balance, right?
Yup.
Right? Now is the time."
My views won't be affected by recency. Surely. Hopefully they won't.
Yeah. The good luck on the ladder, Yaku. Good luck on the ladder. Good luck tomorrow in Duckling Open. Good luck.
Yes. Or, yeah. That will be tomorrow, but maybe not tomorrow by the time you hear this, viewers.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Yeah, with that, I think we're gonna be done for tonight. This went on a little bit longer than I wanted it to. I was like, "Yo, half an hour, let's go." I think it's been like an hour, but short
A
compared
little
to
bit
other
under an
podcasts.
hour, yeah.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So, thank you, Yaka, for joining me. Thank you, Kura, for handling the production, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. We'll see you then, whenever it is. Whenever we do it. Bye.
Bye.